Most entrepreneurs think they need to post content nonstop to grow their audience and blow up their business. But that's just playing the game on nightmare mode, and it's a good way to burn yourself out without getting real results. Instead of spending hours creating endless content across every platform, a better way is to actually just create a well-structured YouTube video that does all the heavy lifting for you. At Upper Hand Creative, we've installed this content system in over 400 businesses to date, helping busy entrepreneurs turn one strategic video into weeks of authority-building content that actually drives leads and sales. So in this video, I'm gonna show you exactly how to leverage YouTube to do the same thing, even if you only have 4 hours a month. But first, let's talk about why most content strategies today aren't working in the first place. And it's actually really interesting if you think about it, because it all comes down to the way that people make buying decisions now. A few years ago, someone could have seen an ad, watch a quick video sales letter from you, and they book a call without thinking twice. But that just doesn't really work anymore, because today's buyers are far more skeptical, and for good reason. If you took a look around social media, you'll quickly understand that everyone is bombarded with low value, overhyped content that's easy to dismiss as spam. So naturally, buyers have just learned to be more critical and skeptical, and it's just way harder to earn their trust now. With so many lookalike offers and self-proclaimed experts in every field, people now need a lot more than just a flashy reel or another short ad to believe that you're the real deal. And it's not just me that's saying this. Google actually conducted research on the digital buying behavior of people, and they uncovered some pretty interesting things. They called this the 7-4-11 rule, which means that a potential client now needs to spend 7 hours engaging with your business across 4 different platforms and through at least 11 separate interactions before they're ready to make a buying decision. So this means potential customers are already researching about you behind the scenes, and Google calls this the 0 moment of truth. Okay, so what does this all mean for you? Well, it means if your content strategy doesn't consistently deliver both quality and quantity, then you're actually losing clients. That's why if you want to scale your business, you need to put out content across multiple platforms. And it all starts with a YouTube video. But why YouTube? Why not Instagram or Facebook or TikTok? Well, for one, YouTube is the second largest search engine right now, owned by the largest search engine, which is Google. So it just makes sense to pour your efforts into a place where you can get the most leverage. Okay, sure, but that doesn't really answer why we need to go all in on long form content, right? Well, look at it this way. Most social media content is like a snack, right? LinkedIn posts, Facebook updates, they're like candy. While TikTok and Instagram reels kind of like appetizers, right? While they're fun, easy to consume, and will give you that quick hit of dopamine, they're not really satisfying on their own. They can't really speak to the specific problem a specific audience has, but a well-structured YouTube video is completely different. It's like a full course meal. It's rich, it's filling, and it actually gives people value, clarity, and a deeper relationship with your brand. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not gonna use the other platforms, because we definitely are, but short form, carousels, tweets, they all have a place within the bigger strategy. But YouTube long form is gonna be the base layer. So you've heard the phrase that content is king, but YouTube long form is queen. Because with just one 10 to 20 minute video, you create the foundation for all the content that follows, and you do it in a way that builds real authority, not just attention, and without having to sacrifice hours of your day creating from scratch. So at Upper Hand Creative, we actually use a proprietary tool called Upper Hand AI, and it's the engine our content team uses behind the scenes to scale this entire workflow. But more importantly, this is something that your team can use too. Just plug in your YouTube video script, and it automatically generates platform-specific scripts and content assets. It's how we help clients multiply their reach without multiplying their workload, and it gives their team a repeatable system to stay consistent across every channel. But here's where most business owners go off track. They assume that this entire process is about going viral or getting views. They've just seen the system, but instead of thinking strategically, they immediately pivot to chasing reach, because they see creators like Mr. Beast, and they assume that they need fast cuts, dopamine edits, and flashy visuals to compete. But this is exactly the wrong strategy, and the people you actually want to attract for your business will click away from that stuff. And this brings me to something that always makes me laugh a little bit, because I see it all the time. Whenever someone's talking about building YouTube business channels the right way, there's always somebody in the comments asking, if you know so much about YouTube, then why do you only have a few hundred views? Firstly, this just shows to me that this person is still in the early process of their YouTube journey, because this is just a fundamental misunderstanding of the platform. And honestly, it's also a misunderstanding of how conversions work. Because just think about it. Will 50 million people really want to watch you talk about how to set up your channel as a lead gen machine? If your point of comparison is Mr. Beast or any other viral creators, then you're already on the wrong track, because virality does not equal revenue, and views don't equal conversions. And there are so many examples of people who prove this every day. Business owners with small audiences who are making more money than creators with massive followings. And that's because their content is built the right way. An example of this is Serge Guattari, who literally has a 7-figure business, even though his channel only has 50K subscribers. And if you look at his videos, they don't really get a lot of views either, which just proves that you don't need to chase reach and views to make money through YouTube. On the flip side, look at someone like Thomas Frank. He built a huge audience around productivity on his main channel, but he left all of that behind to create a smaller, more focused channel around Notion templates. That second channel, Thomas explains, has a fraction of the audience, but it's laser focused on a product that people actually want to buy. And he's publicly said that this new channel made him more money than his original 3 million subscriber channel ever did, even during big sponsor launches.
Well, hello there. It's been a while since I posted on this channel, nearly a year and a half in fact. In this video I want to talk about why I stopped posting on this channel, how doing so actually doubled my income surprisingly.
And this is what happens when you create micro niche channels, and these are channels that speak to the right audience and not to the masses. Iman Gadzhi talks about this a lot actually. There's a video of him breaking down how to succeed in saturated markets by going deeper into niche levels, not just choosing an industry, but drilling down into specific sectors.
Choosing your niche is probably the most difficult decision you have to make as a beginner agency owner.
And that kind of specificity is what creates higher relevance, more trust, and better conversions, which is the core of what actually makes micro niche channels so profitable. And so that's why if you're a business owner, your strategy should not be chasing views or reach. It should be about creating content that shows up in search, builds long-term trust, and delivers real value. So your content has to speak directly to your ideal client profile, and it should move them closer to a buying decision. And in order to do that, your content has to be built around one clear idea. And this is what we call the big domino. So this is essentially the idea that you need someone to believe so that they automatically have to say yes to buying your product. Think of it like this. You don't need to convince people of 10 different reasons to buy. You just need to convince them of one powerful idea, and that's the big domino. And that's why figuring out your big domino is probably the best thing you can do in marketing, because it's how you separate yourself from competition. But once you've done that, here's how you can ensure that your videos will actually build trust and drive real action from your viewers. And it's pretty simple. You just follow the Trust Builder framework, which has 4 important parts to it. So first, it needs to solve a real, urgent problem that your audience has. This is something that they're already thinking about and they're actively trying to fix. If it doesn't hit a pain point, they're not gonna care. Second, it needs to prove credibility. And no, that doesn't mean bragging. It means sharing a quick story, a unique insight, or a real result that builds trust and shows them that you've been where they are. Third, it has to deliver value people would actually pay for. That means no fluff, no recycled advice. Give them something clear and useful that they can apply right away. And finally, it should create an emotional connection or an identity shift. They should walk away with not just the information, but feeling seen, inspired, and more confident in being able to take the next step. If your video hits on all of those 4 points, then you've nailed it. But just as important as what you say is how you say it, because the format and delivery of your video matters just as much as the message itself. And this is where a lot of people miss the mark. When we look at the different types of content out there, you're gonna notice that they each have strengths and weaknesses, and not all of them are built for trust and conversion. If you look at vlogs, for example, they tend to be high in emotion, but they're low in clarity. They're really just meant to capture spontaneous, behind-the-scenes moments, which makes them feel authentic. But because there's usually no structure or planning involved in these types of videos, they end up feeling a little bit scattered. It's great for connecting with an audience for sure, but it's not so great if your goal is to drive action. Then there's the classic talking head video. This format can be super clear and focused, but if it's just you on camera delivering information with no story or personality, it can start to feel a little flat, like you're just delivering a news report. People might learn something, but they won't necessarily remember it or feel moved to take the next step. Now, the sweet spot is a sort of hybrid between these two, so you really want it to be educational videos with storytelling. These are the ones that teach something valuable while weaving in narrative, emotion, and real-life proof. So if you want to structure your content for maximum impact, don't just think about the message, think about the format, because how you deliver the value is just as important as the value itself. And to really kind of bring this to life, I want to show you a real example. So let's look at this video in particular, and we'll break it down and see how it checks all 4 boxes. So first, does it solve a real urgent problem? Absolutely.
This is going to be one of the most in-depth trainings that you've seen on how to increase your show-up rate.
That immediately reframes the problem for his audience. He's not chasing views, he's solving the real pain point of attracting clients. Okay, second, does it prove his credibility? Yep.
So let's say right now you're taking 10 sales calls a day. And let's say that you have a 50% show-up rate, which is not uncommon when I first work with a client. That means you're doing 5 take
making calls a day. And let's say that you're closing at about a 25% rate, which would put you right around 1 close a day. And that times, let's say, a $5,000 price point would mean that you're going to be making about $5,000 a day. Not too shabby, right?
That instantly shows you he's been through it and he tries to meet his audience at their level. But then he figures it out. Thirdly, and probably most important of all, does it deliver value that people would actually pay for? Yes.
Or if we're able to take this 50% show up rate and we're able to actually change it to an 80% show up rate, which is not uncommon when we start working with our clients. That means that instead of taking 5 calls a day, you're actually going to take 8 calls a day. And then if we just assume nothing else changes but the show up rate, that we still have a 25% close rate, we're actually going to go to 2 closes a day. And that means that 2 closes times 5,000 is actually going to be $10,000 a day. So we literally just doubled the business.
Okay, finally, does it create an emotional connection? Yeah, and he even did this earlier.
You went and you met somebody that was in your neighborhood, let's say this past weekend. And you guys hung out, you met him at the dog park, whatever, you guys talked for a couple hours, then you ended up having dinner together, and you got to know him even more, and now you spent, let's say, 5 or 6 hours together. If that person then said, hey, Ravi, do you mind coming over to my place tomorrow? I want to show you something, let's say 12 o'clock. You would show up to that, only because you trust that person and you spend so much time with them, and you'd almost feel guilty or bad if you just didn't show up. Now, let's say, for example, on the other end, let's say I'm at the dog park, somebody approaches me and says, hey, Ravi, I can help you, I don't know, get more booked appointments. If you want to learn more, show up tomorrow at 12 p.m. and show up at my house, and then they just walk away. Well, I'm going to probably not show up at that person's house because I literally just talked to them for 2 seconds. I have almost nothing emotionally invested inside of this, and I don't really trust that person. How do I know that you're legitimate? How do I know that you can actually help me get more booked calls, right? And so I'm going to probably no-show that person. Even though I hate when people no-show me, it almost feels like it's not even that obligated to do it because I barely have built up any trust with that person.
He's essentially telling people that they're not alone in this journey and that even him, someone who's figured it out, also felt the same frustrations they're probably feeling now. And look, if you're watching this and thinking, I don't have time to do any of this consistently, you're not alone in that either. That's exactly why we built a system that helps business owners get all their content done in less than 4 hours per month, and they still look like a top-tier brand across every platform. So you can check it out. The link's gonna be somewhere down below in the description. All right, so now that you know what your content needs to say, let's talk about how to actually structure it. Think of it like trying to cook a meal without a recipe. You can have the most high-quality ingredients in the world on your kitchen table, but if you don't know how they come together, you're probably not going to end up with something that people would actually want to eat. And it's the exact same thing with a YouTube video. You can have the best camera, the sharpest edits, and the most polished visuals, but if your content isn't structured the right way, your message won't land. It's gonna go over people's heads, or even worse, they're gonna click away before they ever get to the good part. So the solution to this is creating what I call a thesis video. This is the one that I made for my channel, and it's the cornerstone piece of content that we use that all of my other videos point back to. So you can think of this kind of like your indirect video sales letter. It's the one that'll do all the heavy lifting of converting viewers into warm leads. This video alone has brought in over $600,000 for our business in the last 4 months or so. To understand why this works so well, let's zoom out a bit for a second. So if you look at Russell Brunson's perfect webinar formula, he says that every sale hinges on breaking down 3 core beliefs that your prospect is always holding. The first core belief is the vehicle belief. This is basically belief in your particular method. So organic content, cold email, LinkedIn outreach, whatever it is, whatever the thing is that you do, that's the vehicle. And your audience, first and foremost, has to buy into that vehicle and believe that that is the method for them to get from A to Z. Second is the internal belief, which is basically, I believe that that method works, but will it work for me? And finally, the external belief, which is something outside of them that they're citing as a reason that this wouldn't work, or citing as an excuse. So time or money or traffic, whatever it may be. This video doesn't need to tackle all 3 of these. It only needs to knock down the vehicle belief. In other words, once you convince the viewer that your method is the right path to solving their problem, then they're more than likely to take the next step with you, and all of the other objections kind of become irrelevant. And creating one is pretty easy through the SHARP framework. Let me walk you through exactly how to do this. So first, you need to state the change, and this is the problem that's changed the game for your audience. The reason it's presented this way is to create urgency. People are just wired to pay more attention to things that have changed, and so this is the perfect way to frame the problem. In my video, I start with this. So what that does is it rewrites how client acquisition works. Now, I obviously unpack that deeper in the full video, but the takeaway is really simple. What used to work just doesn't work anymore. This instantly creates a loop in the viewer's brain and positions me as someone who sees what others don't. Once you get your viewers to feel that way, the next step is to highlight the stakes. And you can easily do this by drawing a clear line in the sand between losers and winners. Whichever side your audience ends up on depends entirely on whether they adapt. So now that your viewer knows the stakes and they don't want to end up on the losing side, you want to actually introduce the answer. This is where you present your unique method. This is going to be the vehicle that solves the very problem that you just laid out. It's the moment where you reveal the system or methodology that bridges the gap between where your viewer is now and where they want to be. In my case, that answer is what we call the content cheat code. Now, I actually went into a lot more detail about the solution, but you get the idea. And introducing or talking about the solution is hardly enough to convince people to jump on board with you, because now they're probably wondering to themselves, well, yeah, can I actually do this though? And that's the next step, which is reassure the viewer. Reassure them that they can do this. So you need to dismantle the internal objection by showing that the path is actually doable and doesn't require massive resources. You provided them a solution, you help them understand that this is doable, but there's one more crucial point you need to address, and it's the biggest elephant in the room. You need to prove that it works. This is also gonna hit on your logical buyers. You can talk all you want and carry the viewer throughout the entire journey, but if you can't actually prove that your vehicle works, you're not gonna be able to close the sale. And so here's how I did that in this video. But at this point, you might be thinking, okay, I get the strategy, but how do I actually pull this off without it taking over my entire schedule? And honestly, that's the exact question we had to solve for, because even with the right framework, if the process burns you out, it's not gonna be sustainable, which is exactly why we created a system around this that takes you less than 4 hours a month to execute. And it's a system that we've now installed in hundreds of client businesses. So for example, we set this up in a financial advisory firm, and in just 90 days, they were able to double their subscribers. But before we dive into exactly how that system works, let's talk about the real reason most entrepreneurs struggle with content in the first place. So most entrepreneurs get stuck in their content journey because they try to do everything by themselves. They're like pilots trying to fly the plane while also acting as the flight attendants, the air traffic control, and the plane mechanic. It's just unrealistic, and it's a recipe for burnout. So where do they end up? They start off motivated, they go all in, but eventually the weight of doing everything alone catches up. They burn out, and then they stop posting. That's not even the worst part though, because some actually do try to delegate the work to other people, and they end up hiring VAs who don't really understand the right thing that's needed for social media content or the strategy, or they work with expensive agencies that completely miss the message. And so they end up not getting the traction that they want, which leads to no leads and certainly no real results that move the needle for their business or make them want to keep going with content. And so what happens next is they either give up completely, thinking content is just not for me, or worse, they convince themselves that they're the only ones who can actually do it right. And the cycle of burnout starts all over again. That's why the real shift, the one that changes everything, is moving away from doing it all yourself and instead building a system around your zone of genius. One where your role is to show up, share your ideas, and stay in your lane while the rest runs on autopilot. And we've actually evolved our process now to meet where our clients are. So it all starts with building your viral database, which is the 5 to 7 content creators in and out of your niche that you think have the best ideas. And through that viral database, the AI is gonna immediately scrape their best performing videos and create proven structures that you can just follow to get your own voice and put your spin on it. And it'll even give you a list of B-roll shots that you need to film to create those assets. And it's even made easier because our system pulls content from anything that you've got. Voice notes, messy Zoom calls, training recordings, even just raw brain dumps, which the content specialist can then easily plug into Upper Hand AI, and then they can get the exact content that you want. Now, after that, you can just film the B-rolls in a few hours and hand that back over to your content specialist, and you're done. Finally, you approve and hit publish, and then the leads start showing up. So at this point, you're now building a trust system that scales with your business. Because when your face and your message show up everywhere consistently and strategically, people will actually stop scrolling and start reaching out. And that's how one great YouTube video becomes more than just content. It becomes your entire marketing engine. It builds trust, attracts the right people, and it works around the clock long after you hit publish. So earlier we talked about how you can get all of your content done in less than 4 hours per month. And it's the same system that we set up to help one of our clients gain 200,000 subscribers on YouTube without lifting a finger. So watch this video next to learn the exact system and see how you can set it up for your business.